So today we are here with Esther Urlus. She is a Rotterdam-based artist, filmmaker, mainly working with motion picture films. So today in this conversation, she is going to share more about her practice. So welcome, Esther.
Hello. I'm here with the dog, so if you hear funny noises, it's not me.
So we are recording this conversation in our studio in Worm. It's an art center in the Netherlands, and in Worm, in the basement of Worm, we also have a dark room. It's a Filmwerkplaats, and Esther is also the founder of the Filmwerkplaats. We're going to talk more about it later. So maybe first question, you could share a bit. How does everything start? I know you used to be a photographer, or you studied photography, and what's the point you moved from photography to, how did you start with the motion picture film practice?
Actually, I already started at the Art Academy, AKI, in Enschede, with motion picture film, because I thought it was really close to photography at that time, and I was actually more interested in moving image than in stills. And a lot of my stills at Art Academy period looked more filmic than stills. So for me it was a very natural way to go there.
Maybe you could also share a little bit, how will you describe your general practice? Because I know you have certain interest in certain historical photographic thing, and then you mix them in a certain way with your practice.
Yeah. Well, it's not only that. It starts actually that I'm really into experimental film. A lot of experimental film are abstract, and I really like the abstract imagery, even if you see certain images. Okay, now how to explain this? Abstract images give you a certain, that as a viewer, but also as the maker, you can feel it in yourself, how your perception is, and what it does to your perception. Mm-hmm. I am also really interested to find out if a certain abstract imagery can provoke certain feelings. Mm-hmm. Feelings you not really can point out what it means, but still it's there. It's very emotional in the sense, but it's from a kind of emotional center in your dinosaur brain, so your neocortex, where your emotions are. But often you not really can say how these start, but you just are underneath. And in experimental film, what I also enjoy very much is a certain emphasis for technique. But analog technique has a certain logic. And this logic and this materiality is really, I think, in a similar way, very, very effective in your dinosaur brain. Mm. Actually, once I've heard, I've read actually a saying long time ago, and that was always a kind of trigger in my practice, and it was meant as an anti thing. It was in the time because that film was declared dead, and then they were really speaking about analog film, which is now called photochemistry film. And there was somebody who said, like, film is dead. Film is now only suitable for the white space, the cube, because film in its way lost his, I call this that people like it because film is very demanding. You have to sit in a cinema, it's a black space, you're seated with more people, and you have to watch the film from the beginning till the end. And then if you undergo this, you cannot go out without being rude and have to pass a lot of people. And so you come out as a cooked potato. And they said film was more nicer in a white cube environment because then as a visitor you could choose your own beginning and end. And then I went like, yeah, but that's not what I want. I want actually that I can force people to watch my art or my films or whatever I make, how I want them to see it from the beginning till the end. And I actually like the idea that you would come out as a cooked potato, and the cooked potato was really like you have to undergo, you cannot escape, and it just smashes you in the face. And so my whole practice is trying to find a way to make an audience feel like cooked potatoes.
It's interesting because you earlier you say you like experimental film, and also the way you do it, you want to create certain feeling or almost like a physical sensation of feeling. And I recognize in some of your work you particularly focus on that. For example, we could pick a few to talk a little bit about it. For example, in Deletion.
Yes.
You, because I joined the filming as well, like you were going to a few locations in Rotterdam where something had happened, like a murder or something terrible thing has happened, and then you film in certain spot like that. But the film it end up in a very abstract way, and then you also use a very specific technique for that. And then could you maybe share a little bit about the background of this work, Deletion, and combined with this experience?
Yeah, in Deletion, I really tried. I call it my splash and splatter horror film, but it's also literally because the image is splattered. But it was really to trigger a kind of sense that you can feel, but you cannot really point out why. Mm-hmm. So the idea was that I would film on location, so guilty landscape parts, little details in the landscape. And in this landscape, brutal things happened that caused certain things in the society. Just to see if you would sense this. And so my quest was how to provoke a similar feeling to an audience, an almost physical feeling of that you feel something, and it's oppressing, not very, for Deletion at least, a kind of sense of horror. Mm-hmm. Without seeing anything. So you see something, but it's not like a very obvious. So how can imagery and moving image give a kind of physical, emotional feeling?
Because in this particular film, Deletion, you're also inspired by autochrome process. So it's a very abstract film, and it's a lot of different color mixing with all the dots, or dots of tiny fragments, and then there's a lot of movement. And then through the time being, I think it was like usually your film is between 8 to 11 minutes ish, I guess. So through the time being, like people are only seeing kind of like a certain shape in the middle of the images, more or less remaining there, but a lot of color keeps shifting as like a fragmental dust or dot. Could you share a little bit why this inspiration of autogram was fitting in the feeling you would like to create in deletion.
Okay, I'm trying to explain a little. I'm often very triggered by pioneering techniques, because in the beginning of photography, but mainly also film, they had a kind of almost total openness to a new medium, and often these pioneers were amateurs, so they loved the idea of doing research, but it wasn't not completely professional yet. So it was really out of the love of a new medium, and they really put a lot of emphasis on trying stuff. And they, my thing is always color, because for me color represents a certain certain emotion, and so I really looked at the pioneer state of how to create color in film with hardly any, with illusional methods. One of them is Lumiere Brothers' Autochrome, and it is a beautiful but rather strange idea. It is that you make a picture, so it's photography, and you make a picture through colored potato starch. And the potato starch is colored in red, green, and blue, although by the time it is invented, so really, really early 1900s, they were not able to make a red sensitive emulsion yet, so it's basically little off color. I like the idea that you make a color system based on potato starch, but I also like the idea that you have to work with what you at that moment are capable of. So the colors are just off, because it's not really red, green, and blue. Red, green, and blue has a certain color mixing system that if you combine those, you mix towards additive mixing, and you mix towards a white light. And with these colors, you can form all colors. But if you change one of them, you have a slightly off nature. And I'm always triggered by little things that are not really mistakes, but the kind of, not just that. And then often in my work, I go from one, just not that mistake, to another, and then I find ways to work it out. So deletion was inspired by the autochrome, so the off colors, and also the idea that you have a lot of, well, you hardly see the grainy, but if you zoom in, you see the grain. And so deletion is a kind of zoom into the grain. Mm-hmm. And a color mixing. The idea was that if I would mix all the colors, red, green, and blue, the image would appear. But of course, it didn't happen. Something completely different happened. And because in film, film is very special. Because in painting, you only have a subtractive color mixing. So the more color you add, the darker it gets. Also very beautiful. Imagine the more color you add, the darker it gets. But in film, you can do both subtractive as additive. So the more color you add, the darker it gets. That's a negative idea, process. Or you do the other way around. So the more color you add, the lighter it gets. And these ideas really triggers me. So you can make, in the sense of this dinosaur brain background, that you can have a negative image or a positive image. And in emotional, you could play with this. Yeah. So it was triggered, like if you color mix to an additive color, will it be giving you a nicer feeling than if you mix to a negative space.
Nice, because I think this whole color research, actually, the edition is made in 2017, but actually your color process of trying and error and searching, exploring actually seems a little bit earlier, back to maybe you studied in EDO 2008. It's kind of almost like I don't know, it look like it's the first time you start to mix this printing technique that you often use in different ways through some of the film. For example, EDO, Deep Red, and Rotterdam. I feel like, would you like to share a little bit about the starting point of when you start to work with this specific printing technique with so many layers, and sometimes mixing negative, positive, and you use black and white as a starting point and start to develop color reversal, color negative, that just all this process also linked to what you mentioned earlier about the color mixing. So you can use some of the example of this tree film or other you would like to mention.
Well, my color research, or not really research, is even earlier, and it started already early 2000. That was almost a kind of quest in, because I come really from I really enjoy doing it myself, in the sense that only then you really have kind of control about the materiality, because if you send something to a lab, it's not you who can develop and make the mistakes. Well, most labs don't make mistakes. And so my first quest actually started with some abandoned interiors, and that was really a quest, because when I went to Art Academy, they always said color, don't do it yourself. So it was both a quest, like I want to do it myself, and to see if it's as difficult as everyone always said. And I found out if you do it, just do it without almost thinking about it, similar to how Pioneer started things. So I just filmed a lot of color negative, color direct positive, and developed it almost boldly, with no background in it. And I found out there was a ramjet. I didn't even know this. And so going through this, previously it was always black and white what I made. I started to shift to the beautiful world of color. And ideally, really, it started that I wanted to also print, because color negative, you still have to send out and make a print. At that point, that was what I could do. And I really wanted to have everything by myself. So I wanted to start printing my own films. The only thing, I didn't have anything. And then it started that somebody pointed me out that you could actually print on an editing table. And so I was trying out, and but I was working with black and white towards color partly. I tried color to color, and things completely, they looked nice, but things went wrong. And when it went wrong, something really happened and triggered me. And I also had already a background in silkscreen printing, a little also triggered, but then with photography. So silkscreen printing, photography towards color. And I actually started with Ideal in 2008. I really started to work with this kind of silkscreen printing technique on film. And actually till today I'm still doing that. And I also started printing with equipment that was not designed to print, but still would work. And using equipment that is not designed for a certain technique gives you a similar openness and freedom. And it's often a little a technique for dummies. So, how to explain this? So the technique is not that important. It's not like important, but it's not that on top of the film. And yes, the film looks really like a technique film, but because of the simplicity of the technique, well, at least that's how I see it. I hope always that it gives you a certain openness. And also at that point, I went completely off nature again, because me as an artist, a lot of pioneers started doing research in photography because they wanted to capture nature in reality, like how they see it, like a copy of nature. For me, it's the other way around. It's more like I want to show nature, which you don't normally see when you go out with your eyes and your brain. I want to show that we still see nature, but with different colors. Because I'm also fascinated that probably only humans see nature as what we consider seeing nature. Probably my dog sees the nature completely different from me. I don't even know if he sees colors. Probably he does, but how? I don't know. And also these things, which is again really, really, early brain adaptation. So that always is part of my vision on color.
Yeah, it's really nice to hear your vision, because often when people see your work, it's immediately people thinking about the technique, because this is definitely a lot of labor work involved. But I also know it's a lot of trying and error, and then a lot of beautiful surprise or beautiful mistake you receive, and then you continue. But I think people will be interested to know, for example, maybe you could share a little bit from the Deep Red or Rotterdam. I think they have slightly different printing. Maybe you can just share, how do you start the printing, and how did you adding up so many layers? Yeah, just a little bit of process.
But Deep Red is basically only additive color mixing. It's all printed on ectochrome, just before the earlier ectochrome, before Kodak stopped making it. So that was 2012 or something. Mm-hmm. And printing on camera stock, because ectochrome is camera stock, with a high sensitivity is actually a stupid idea to do. And I like these things that not everything is done with a reason. And I like to do, I'm trying not to say stupid things, but I like things that you just do something because you want to see what happens. And I also know that a lot of my films look very much about the technique, but for me the technique is a tool, and it gives you a tool to drift too much from the pure image, and it also makes it that it's again give you the possibility not to completely copy nature as how we see it, but start drifting from it. And so I found out that additive color mixing is fun. But in the Rode Mole, I wanted to make a mixture of additive and subtractive. And I always thought like additive is the most beautiful color mixing you can have, because you go towards the white light. Deep red is actually a very happy. It was again to provoke a certain feeling. I remembered from my youth that when you were visiting with your parents, young, early, so like 4 or 5 years, I must have been, that when they were driving back in the car by night, going home, that you were lying, well, at that time you were allowed to do a lot, you were lying on the back near the window, and then you were looking at the lights at the streets. So actually Deep Red is trying to give you that feeling that you are triggered, you are in a kind of sleep state, and you see these strange figures passing by in strange colors. So with Deep Red, it was about that feeling, and additive color mixing, and starting to completely drift off negative, positive image. So this technique gave me the possibility to go into this. In the Rode Mole, it was really it's actually a tribute to a painting by Piet Mondrian, the Red Mill. Rode Mole is Dutch for red mill, and it's in Piet Mondrian painted this painting in between his figurative to complete abstract. So it's an in-between part, and it's a out of I call this. It's the he painted the Red Mill in a complete heavy blue surrounding, and the shape of the mill is also not anymore like it's more like a rocket, and I like that idea, and also the form of a mill, an old Dutch mill, can be quite abstract if you look differently at it. And I also like the idea because the mills have a lot of movement, and movement means for me color mixing. As soon things starts to move, and moving image, you can provoke your own movement. You can add color mixing. So Red Mill is a tribute to this painting, but it's also a play with subtractive and additive color mixing. And again, I made a mistake. Something happened which completely triggered me. And I found out why it happened, and it's a so-called pseudo bas-relief at the end of the film in Red Mill, Rode Mole. And it happened because I was developing, and the developer was tooled. And in my head, the idea was that I would make an image that had off colors, so orange and pink, because in my area, orange and pink, I don't know how to say, but in Dutch we say it vloeken. So that these colors don't match, give you a strange feeling. But by using a little older developer, because I didn't want to make a new one, just because it takes like a day, because I was at that point really making ECN and ECP from scratch. So and I thought, I'm just going to develop anyway. And all the colors were one color, orange. And then a little line appeared, like a line drawing, which is a pseudo bas-relief, and it gives you the feeling of that it had a small 3-dimensional. So then my quest to this 3-dimensional started, and in one of my later films, this is really more tried, which is Study for a Battle. So that's completely about this three-dimensional idea of, and also that you get a kind of line of drawing.
Would you like to maybe we talk about this study for an battle, the Veldslag? Because there is also a story behind it, right? Yeah, because you this image, this film, you use a constantly, almost like a loop image of a horse falling. Is it?
Yeah, my family always makes jokes about me, like when they watch my films, they only see little spots of color, and then I talk about it with a full story, which could be a feature narrative story, and then everything I put in like 8 minutes with a full story. I don't know. I always work out of a kind of strange stories that give me so much curiosity towards it. Study for a Battle is a title I used. These are drawings from the Middle Ages, 1300. And like Pisanello. And he once a painter. And he made a lot of studies of horses dead on the battlefield, falling horses. I use often, lately I use practically only horses in my film. So I try to have this little study, which are pencil drawings, but because they are so old, they were already hardly to see. So I also try to go back to the area and also find ways of like techniques they were able at that time, techniques and knowledge they had at that time to put it back in the film. And for me, the idea was that it was a loop of falling horses, which could be again provoke a certain feeling, but because they are looped, so it's horse falling constantly, and then double layers, and some loops of the same falling horse. It's slightly longer than the other loops, so you start to have a kind of off sync. It's like a music play. I think this film, Study for a Battle, which is a study, the whole film is a study, and the study is also about techniques from music, like phase shifting, to have that in film. And again, it's basically, you hardly see anything. You see some contours, and the idea is that it still gives you a certain feeling.
Because I remember this film you did. You found this research about all different color of pea in this film.
Yeah, well,
you make a developer out of it.
That's yeah. Again, I went into what time area are these drawings made, these sketches, and then I got completely distracted by the medical research, because I'm always looking for colors, and I found these color wheels. At that time, the Filmwerkplaats, where I'm basically always working to make my films, we got a Oxbury out of London, and it had a color wheel as well, and it has some similarities. So I was like, oh, color wheel. So I was looking it up, and it was the color wheel of pea colors. At that time, the medical science was that to find out what disease you had, they were looking at your pea, and it had a certain color, then it probably was this. So this color wheel, I tried to put this color wheel into the film by getting these colors. And then I also found another thing. I was also, but that was later. I found just you're wandering and you drift. My mind always drifts, and I go from one to another thing. And I found out a research from the 1920s about phenol. And that research claimed that phenol, which is very important in photochemistry film, because phenol is a developer agent. That is the trigger that makes silver black into a black and white film. And basically color is also a black and white film. Still today it's based on black and white layers for red, green and blue. So I found this research about phenol in horse pee, that it contains 20 times more phenol than human pee. So I got completely distracted, and I asked a lot of members from the Filmwerkplaats with a little bucket in their hands, can you please collect me some horse pee? Some really tried their best, but it also made them feel a little awkward to go to his table. I also tried it, and it didn't really work, because most horse owners didn't like the idea I was trying to collect the pee. Luckily, at one point, I just got a horse. And it works. Pee works anyway as a developer. If it's human pee or horse pee, it will work. But the images are very vague, and that was actually also one of the reasons to use it, to see what happens.
Because this film, also you use this soundtrack particularly for a reason, I remember. It was like constantly...
Yeah, it's a really annoying thing of metal on metal, which is stretched, and it's close to the 1000 hertz beep, which is part of film history. The beep on the two before. This beep is very important for lab technicians, so they can know where to level both volume as tone. So, but also to make sure the film is in sync, because in film, optical sound is separated from the image. So it's a kind of stretched 1000 hertz beep throughout the whole 8 minutes. Again, to give you an annoying feeling, so that your sound can really, I think sound can really give a physical awareness. Unpleasant, pleasant, all these things sound can do. I think sound can do it even better than images. So I want to make a total thing, like how far can you go for a physical experience. And then imagine you have to watch a film in darkness, and you have to go through it from beginning till end, like I wanted, because it's rude to stand up because you're annoying all the other visitors. So you have to sit there and just let it come over you like a cooked potato. And then the sound is very physical.
I remember you also mentioned, because the sound is so present, so long, so consistent, till the end, when the sound finished, you kind of also like this kind of almost like an echoing...
Yeah, the idea was that it would just stop at one point, and that you would, after enduring, because, you know, the film is not that long, and I really sentenced myself, in 8 minutes, they can just handle. Well, I was hoping, because I don't want to make that unpleasant films, but I want to provoke a certain physicality for the viewer. And the idea was that it would stop, that you would almost, because then you get out as a viewer, out of this awful physical sound experience, that it almost would give you a kind of like a reborn. Oh, that's too much, but like, gosh, I made it. And I actually, I'm still doing research in this physicality, because also Ellie is about physicality, which how to get physicality that you really experience a certain feeling. And the only thing with film, motion picture was, and that's a research already from the 60s, flicker films. So a flickering image also provokes. And some people even sentence hallucinations if they have to constantly watch a flickering image. That also has to do with brain waves. The dinosaur brain again, that our brainwave has a certain rhythm, and that's close to in between 12 and 15, let's call it frames per second, but that's your brainwave. So if you go over this, then you experience a certain physicality. So a flicker can provoke certain things, and again, in color, this flickering, for me, besides this physical experience, it was also that how would color mix in flickering if you don't mix them on the film itself, in the process, in the technique you're using, but really like red to green, what does, and then constantly red green, what would the viewer see? Would color still mix? Would our brain mix these? It's not a finished experiment yet.
Because Ellie is actually quite a special film, because maybe we could give a little bit background, because you were invited to be in Greece, and then you were at this sea, and then you see this boat, and then maybe you can give a bit background, like how I know there's one part you use this flickering technique to evoke this physicality or this strong sensation. Also continue this color mixing research, but you use a certain way. I remember you say sometimes because the rhythm, so you see this boat time to time. Could you maybe?
Well, the background is a little bit like. I was invited to come to Tinos for by a lab, the Athens lab, to film, to show films, to a small lab meeting with other filmmakers from our world, and I went out really early because where I was located was really close to the sea, and then really early in the morning I wanted to go out to swim, and then I saw this huge boat, but it looked like a military boat, like a fregat, and it was in the time that Greece was actually declared bankrupt by the European Union. And I was traveling a few days without a phone. Well, at least the phone died. I had no clue. And then I ended in the evening late on this island to this guest house, and early morning, because they said the sea is really like, you go down and it's there. And it will be empty. So when after arriving, I went early in the morning to swim, and the first thing I saw was this huge ship of war. And it gave me a very unpleasant feeling, like, did I miss something? What happened when I was traveling? Did I miss something, some background story? Are we in war? Is Greece in war with it? Anyway, so I went back to the house and like, what is this huge ship? And it really gives an awful feeling. And they said, well, that's Ellie. And it's a tribute to the Second World War victims in Greece, because exactly on that spot where the boat is, this fregat, is the spot where Greece got involved in the Second World War by the Italians bombing the Allied ship, and it sank with people on it, and then Greece had to protect themselves. So this is really the spot in Greece where they sucked into the Second World War. So the idea was that I would film this ship, because the ship is only there for that day. It comes in the night, so it came exactly on the same moment I came, and then it stays there for anchor the whole day, that day, and then it leaves in the night. It also has a religious purpose, but I was more interested in the other story of the ship. And then, so I tried to film the sea completely empty, and then when it starts to flicker, the ship would appear. That was also the idea behind it.
Because when you do the flickering printing, you also try to do the color mixing, so you're constantly using red and green.
Yeah, I was actually at that point. I had my favorite editing table using as a printer. It's a 6-plate, so I actually 6-plate. It means I also could do a kind of zebra loop, which is the flicker loop, and then I had multiple loops with different rhythms, like 1-1 or 1-2 or 2-2 or 1-3, 3-1. All these in negative and in positive. Well, 1-1 is always 1-1, but all the other rhythms give a different rhythm. And then I started to print it through these zebra loops, and then to see what happens. Yeah. They are completely orchestrated, so I made sure they were always on in sync, with simple techniques like making a hole through it, so plural ideas. I wanted to make something visible which is not in the main image, and I wanted to see what happens if you start mixing color, not in the film, or not only in the film, but also in the rhythms. Yeah, it was quite a task. It was fun, and I
because all these, although it's maybe quite logic in some way, and then your practice also involve a lot of researching and trying, and then error and trying. Do you really like take notes for yourself, or doing all those
constantly making notes, and sometimes I even cut out little frames, but mainly notes. Mainly notes. Also, I put sometimes pieces of the filters I'm using. I'm really using color filters, in the sense like most of the time these are cheap filters, not official filters, but in these Lee booklets of light filters, or old light filters I cut up into pieces, which I just really tape with paper tape in front of the light bulb of the editing table. So sometimes I even put the filters I used in.
So you have a clear booklet of all the things.
Well, it's all handwritten, and for me it's clear, but I can imagine it's completely chaotic for others when they see it. And I always keep them, because I don't want to do a research I've already done and gave me findings to like what did I do that, because doing it yourself, you will find out that things go wrong or accidents happen. Accidents happen, and accidents are fun if you can redo the accident and exploit it. So basically my practice is going from one accident that happened and exploiting the accident, and then trigger other accidents. Kind of, well, that's always the idea I have from the cinematographic pioneers, that they all already also went to exploiting accidents to other accidents, like the Lumiere brothers when they made the autochrome. They tried also cornstarch and flour starch. So they also had to, but just by doing it and see what happens.
Because your work is sometimes very research based. You have this research of a story that attract to you, or this technique attract to you,
Yes.
and then you mix them. Could you share a little bit how do you do research, or how do you? I understand from certain thing happen and you went into it and then you got distracted.
Yeah.
Do you have a certain way how you start the research, combine the research into your practice, and you really made a film out of it?
Actually, all research also started by accident, by reading something on internet, looking for something completely different, or finding a picture and go like, what is this? So Conrad and Corvus, my handmade emulsion, started with some found footage that came with a projector I bought. I bought a projector and I got some black and white film, and the images started to trigger me. So little things, accidents, and then my brain started to float away.
Yeah. Because I always have a difficulty pronounce this Conrad and Kornfürst. Because this is actually quite an important moment, because that's also the moment you start to apply this research about making your own emotion.
Yeah.
And I think that's one track of your journey started. But this film also has a many multiple layer of the story itself, the technique itself, and also how you continue the research in applying the color and the emotion making, and then combining with the images. That start from how that film started, maybe.
Yeah, it is this little piece of found footage that was a sequence of falling horses. But then during the Olympiade in 36, it was the Olympic Games in Berlin, and this was a sequence of horse that had to jump over obstacles, and the sequence which came with the projector was a sequence of falling horses that stumbled in these obstacles, and some quite dramatic, and that's where the story started to go that direction. The story of Conrad and Kurfürst. The Kurfürst is the horse and Conrad is the rider during the Olympic Games. German military. At that time, only militaries were supposed to do the Olympic Games, at least for the horses part. And it's also a story about fraud and fraud in the sense that because it was Germany in this period, and they really wanted Germany to succeed in all sports, all important sports. So they frauded the game for the German riders, and this Conrad stumbled through everything. I'm not going to go too deep because I want to talk a little bit about my handmade emulsion thing. Handmade emulsion, I started to research how to be completely off grid. What if? Because it was in the time all film archives are digitalized. Everything, all grants were more about the digital medium to explore this, the new possibilities. And for me, the analog film was not even explored that much. And I also was a little like, what if photochemistry film, motion picture film, completely get obsolete. There's no way, because it's one of the few mediums you have to buy. Most people buy their films from now Kodak. But how to be independent of this idea, so this industry. So it's also a little bit a kind of how to become completely independent. I'm always triggered by the pioneers. So I thought, like, if in the pioneer state they were able to invent the medium, why not just reinvent the medium? So I started to reinvent the medium by reading all the books from the early days, how they started. So the emulsion in this film is very, very primitive. It's a very primitive early state emulsion. Because in the earlier days of cinematography, the government of the United Kingdom and France put a lot of money to have all these tryouts of the pioneers completely open and public. So they put a lot of money to that everyone could print their research. At one point, money got involved and everything got closed and patented. But that was in a later state, and I really I like the lab culture, that the network and the do-it-yourself artist-run labs, film labs, that it's all about sharing your knowledge and keeping your research open, and by showing your films and the techniques you're using, but also by put everything in the open. So it's a tribute to the pioneering stage and also getting off grid. That's the dog.
Yeah.
The dog is want to go out. I want to say something about why we're starting the Filmwerkplaats in Rotterdam, an artist-run film lab nowadays. Yeah. That was really to keep the possibility open for artists to work with the chemistry film medium, the analog film medium. And that was really started in a time it was getting obsolete, at least by the musea and everything. The whole emphasis was on the new medium. And for me, old and new mediums, especially if a medium is abundant, I think, left by industry and money, I think it's getting a very, very interesting or usable medium for artists. And I think it's also important that artists have the freedom to use whatever medium they want. And at that point, there was absolutely nothing left to work handwise with analog film in the Netherlands. So that was one of the reasons. And a lot of companies stopped working with analog. So a lot of equipment was abundant. And if you were not quick enough, it was even just demolished as scrap metal. So I thought we have to collect all these tools and devices so artists can keep on working. And sometimes these were devices that once were high state, expensive devices, where a do-it-yourself artist would, in the beginning, not be allowed to touch. Mm-hmm. And that is still one of the reasons to have something like a do-it-yourself lab, and you see that worldwide, that artists want to keep on working with analog film because of the materiality, the tactile, but also about a certain how you call these techniques? It's these
Knowledge.
machines. Well, it's also the devices you have to work with. They're so physical. Often film devices, film machines are huge, heavy, clunky, because of the technology where they come from. But it's also that the more clunky a machine is in film, the more stable your image. So it also had a reason to make them heavy. And to work with these machines is really also a kind of extra physicality and almost the tactileness of operating these machines. And I think for a lot of artists, this is still a very appealing technique. Especially because film is rather logic, and you can reinvent it yourself quite easily if you start from the pioneers.
Yeah. And then because Filmwerkplaats was set it up in 2000, and now it's like 23 years later. For you as a founder, for you as an artist still working with this media, could you share a little bit what is the current challenging for you as
working with this medium? But the most challenging is actually...
And then the potential, yeah.
I think the most challenging is that the industry is stopping, and that also that the knowledge is, at least the industrial knowledge, is disappearing really fast. Also, these devices are no longer made, so it's all about maintenance. That's also a challenge. These devices are often working with a technology from the 60s and 70s, so that's also a challenge. Everything is a challenge in nowadays. But also, thanks to a lot of new techniques and thanks to internet, it's very easy to find networks. I'm going to call the dog because it's making a noise. These machines are once made, and everything, you can remake it, and with the new techniques and with everything, maybe we can make them even handier for an artist practice. Because these machines were industrial machines, but now we want them to be artist machines. So we can just make new machines in theory and give them extra possibilities. So that's one of the opportunities. And I also see that basically for the new generation, actually, analog film is a new medium, because they grew up with the new medium, what we call new medium, but for them the analog and photochemistry film is the new medium. And it's a strange time, because at one point analog film is really booming. It came from abundant by the art, because it was film. It's now one of the main players in a lot of art exhibitions, going to a new medium. But at the other hand, all the industry is really stopping. There's really, really hard to find film material to film with. It's getting less and less and less. So it's a strange times. But I think it's also challenging, because I really, really think that because it's really booming now, that feeling I have, maybe new possibilities, industrial possibilities will step in. Because there were so many different type of factories making film. Where are all these machines? Is it just you only have to probably find these machines and start them again? But that's I don't know. That's a good question to ask in the network.
And Any question or anything you would like to share that I didn't ask? Although I do have one thing I want to ask. I remember you also mentioned about, I forgot where you mentioned, like, I remember a long time ago you did say you like the idea of a hero is not a hero. The hero has a mixture of these things, and then that I can see you already started a little bit in this El Sando hometown practice, but then later on maybe even in the Conrad and Confirst also has a little bit thing. And then would you like to share a little bit this film that you actually want to make? You don't need to tell the details, but this concept of this thing that you're attracted by, if it's okay.
Yeah, well, it's similar, like again, perception of negative space and subtractive color mixing, and positive space in additive color mixing. It's also this idea of heroes. It is from the perspective of the viewer if it's a hero or a villain, I like these contradictions. It's really, yeah. So also, I would like to make a longer film, and have a viewer in a longer film with really a subject that can be or a hero or a villain, depending who's interacting with the character. So the idea was, again, of course, a horse. To have a horse in a film that is both a villain as a hero, at least by the spectators, and build a story around it. But then it will be a science fiction film.
Nice. So, anything else you want to share?
No, but the question why always a horse, that has a background, but for now I leave it.
Would you like to share?
No, not yet.
Not yet.
Yeah, well, it's yeah, for me horses also have a similarity as some similarities of their perception in the history as analog film. Like once the main character and then abandoned, and then with a revival and still, and they always had a very strange relationship with humans, and I like these strange things. And of course they see the world completely different, because still nobody knows if they can see color or not. But I think they should see color, no?
I know you are very obsessed with a horse, and you're also riding horses yourself, but something a bit personal, because you also have a horse sign.
Yes, in Chinese.
And then I know you say you actually like the description, but do you see some similarity between the way you work and the type of film you make, and then also this mixture of different perspective thing in your practice?
You mean this it's not really conflict, but negative, positive sign things. Yeah, I'm quite triggered to this negative and positive emotional things that also animals, humans, oh, he never bite anyone, and then this dog kills his owner. In humans, it's similarities. Like there's a negative and a positive side, always, depending where you are.
Thank you, because I know you for quite many years. I have seen all your film. I follow the process, but through this interview, I feel really grateful that you share again in a deeper level, in different perspective, and share again your vision, your ideas, and then I feel really inspired and touched. And then I think we will leave a lot of links that people can see more of your research, your work, and thank you very much.
Thank you.